my friend. Um, so we've known each other for a while. We've been running in the same circles for longer than we've actually, met. I don't even remember the first time we met. Was it at maybe SUNY or MJ Unpacked? MJ Unpacked, I
Probably
think.
MJ Unpacked, yeah.
Yeah. But we've been talking to each other for a while. I am a huge fan of all of your research and all of the things that you do. And so I'm really happy that you agreed to come on my Flora Fridays with me. Uh, I have just started this podcast this year. I started in January, and I've been interviewing people like crazy. So I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but that's okay.
That's
Um,
okay. Thanks for having me on. And also, I think we're going to do a dual podcast. So this is
yeah.
also going to air on BioActive. So, hey to all the BioActive listeners. I'm really excited to talk to Anna Schwabe today. And Anna does some really cool stuff with cannabis genetics and has published some really cool papers on cannabis genetics as well. So I'm sure we're going to get into talking about the work that she's been doing. We're going to talk about the work that I've been doing. And then we're going to create a cool little podcast with them smushed together.
Blended. You're blended.
Blended.
So we'll have to see how this goes. I mean, 50-50 chance, right? It'll either be horrible or it'll be fantastic.
No, 95% is going to be fantastic, I'm sure.
Nice. Well, it is so good to have you on the show, and you have been so busy, and I mostly see you on the social medias these days just because you haven't been going to conferences because you're a brand new mom and it's springtime and all of the things.
Yeah, I go to some conferences. I'm going to the Grow Up conference in Canada, Toronto. I don't know if you've heard of that one. I'm going to go there soon. But I've been going to more local shows, so like NECAN Boston, NECAN Vermont, that kind of stuff. And I probably will still make it to like California a couple times. But I do love being home with my baby, and that's been really, really fun. And social media is easy to do from wherever you are. So that's been cool too. And it's been fun to like actually have some traction on social media. I feel like I've been posting forever and it's finally like reaching new audiences, which is the craziest thing ever. I don't know what changed, but that's been cool to see.
It could be the release of the throttle from TikTok because historically TikTok has been like absolutely no cannabis. You say the word and you're off. But it seems like they've kind of lightened up. I mean, unless you're like talking about smoking weed. And even then, like there are some influencers on TikTok, um, Stoner Gump, and there's a couple bud tenders and stuff, and they do highly educational stuff. And I think that I don't know, I don't work for TikTok, but it seems like they're letting the education content come through.
I think so. But TikTok also, I think, recently got the ability to kind of like age restrict some of their content. So I think that has definitely helped. So instead of just like removing videos, now it can be like, okay, well, this isn't available for everyone to see, but for certain like cohorts of people, it's safer to see. And they used to also just remove everything. And now they'll just say, like, okay, this is demonetized. So now you can't make money off of this video, but it can still exist on the internet. And that's fine with me. I've like never made any money on TikTok because all my videos go against community guidelines. So I'm like, whatever, as long as you can keep it up here, like that's really all that matters to me. But it does feel like something's kind of shifting in the social media world. I don't know if it's because of Schedule 3. I don't know if it's because someone new is working at TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is, but I'm in support of it.
Yeah, so this Schedule 3 thing is pretty wild. I my brain is all over the place when I think about this. Like I feel like there's some good elements. I also feel like we're getting tricked.
Yeah, I wanted to ask your opinion on that. If you thought it was going to like open doors for the cannabis industry, or if it was more like a pharmaceutical move, like what's the vibe telling you?
So I still don't see pharmaceutical companies getting involved. Like they have always been one molecule, one outcome for the most part, right? I don't see them going to whole plant medicine. That's just not in their like they just don't want to do that, right? And I can't see all of a sudden. I mean, yes, there are pharmaceutical companies that are interested in cannabinoids and things like that, but still it's pretty much formulations. It's not go down and buy some weed and smoke it. Like
No.
they're not really interested in that. So I also don't see that people are going to need prescriptions to get it. Like I think that it'll still kind of stay the same. What I don't like about it is that the DEA is going to have full control. Like they're going to, if you're a medical grower, you sell it to the DEA and then they resell it back out to the public. And I feel like that's going to set a precedence where the DEA gets to set the price, right?
Yeah.
Of what they'll pay for it and also what they're selling it at. And I don't like that. And I feel like this is a big trick. And then
It it
in
has
terms,
always been about control, and that is like the ultimate level of control to be like, okay, we want to be able to tag everything that comes in and everything that goes out. And I feel like myself included, I would feel fine about Schedule 3 if home grow was allowed. If they included that, I'd be like, whatever, people take what you want, but as long as like the people can grow the plant at home and like be a little bit decentralized, then that's fine. But obviously that's not happening because they want the money to funnel through the government. So I agree on like the aspect of feeling tricked. I think we're always getting tricked by the government, but that's just me.
same. And especially with this current administration, they just seem, like I don't know, say one thing and do another. So I mean, I don't know. Are they going to take away home grow? I mean, there's so the Schedule 3 is all for medical cannabis, right?
Yes.
This is not, this doesn't pertain to recreational. So the dispensaries at the state level are still going to be able to function, right?
Well, so yeah, so it's still a Schedule 1 drug if it's a like adult use recreational product. So I don't fully understand what that means for the companies that don't register through the government as, one of those ways of getting a medical product. I'm not really sure, but I agree. Like, I do think pharma's getting their little thingies all over cannabis. I think it might come out looking more of like a compound drug where you might have like two or three active ingredients in a capsule form, super standardized. It's probably not going to be whole plant medicine. But, there's also botanical drugs that people can try to push through the FDA that could be full plant medicine. And that doesn't have to be pharma either. That could be cannabis companies if they wanted to try to apply for that. Of course, that costs like, $7 million to get anything through the FDA. So it's going to be very dependent on who has the funds, who has the bandwidth, who has the ability to do that, who has the unique genetics, unique formulations to do that. So I think that's going to be kind of the next front. But where I see it kind of the diverge happening is like, the cannabis industry as it's operating now is going to be very like whole plant focused, hopefully. So like, flower and rosin and those types of like whole plant medicine, whereas the pharma or pharma adjacent companies are going to move towards like the very much rarefying the plant, kind of stripping it down to a few active ingredients and then selling those in like dosable standardized capsules. But this is just what I think. I have no idea what's actually going to happen.
No, I think so too. I think that there's going to be formulation, and there's companies out there currently that do standard formulas, like Enthea. It's Enthea Care. I never know how to say
Yep,
that,
and Thea
but
Care. Yep.
okay, so they have tinctures that are all. It has whole plant, but it's always has, this amount of this and this amount of this and this amount of that. And I can see pharma doing that. And I know there's been companies that have been working on this forever where they've, added in this to see what happens and then added in this to see what happens and then added a terpene. So, form mixture formulations I think could be a thing in the form of tinctures or pills or I don't know, suppository or whatever, I don't, and in terms of like smokable or inhalable products, maybe like, the puffers, but not,
Yeah, some sort of inhaler type device. Yeah, agree. You're not going to be buying pre-rolls through the pharmacy anytime soon.
no. And then, with the FDA approved medicines, are people going to have to go through the pre-clinical trials and clinical trials to show, or is it going to, because it is like an FDA approved drug, right? Is you have this medicine and you use it for this. So it's not just like, oh, have some RSO and get better.
Yeah, and that's actually why I think that it's going to be like a compound type thing instead of whole plant because every active ingredient, especially like over X amount of percent in that final formulation, is going to have all of those like preclinical and clinical studies on toxicology and safety and all that stuff. So, like, certain compounds like THC, for instance, we already have an FDA approved drug, Marinol, right? And same thing with CBD, we already have Epidiolex. So we already have that data for those compounds, but it's really on what else you're adding into that formulation. And the level of complexity is going to equal the level of funding that you need to push that through clinical trials and the amount of time. If you have to look at each of those individual active ingredients through that clinical lens, it's going to be extremely expensive and it's going to take an extremely long time.
Big company, big pockets.
Yeah.
Pharma, pharma, right? So I just learned, and I didn't realize this, that Marinol is made from CBD. It's a synthetic THC. So is the data that we have on Marinol relevant? Because it's a because I know when you make it from, there's isomers and left versus right versus trans versus cis versus chair versus all of these different ways that the molecule can change its shape. It doesn't change like the weight or the atoms that are in it or the bonds necessarily, but all kinds of different structural isomers um from how the plant folds that or does makes that molecule versus how we make it in a lab. We've got different things. So you know this kind of stuff better than I do.
This has been a conversation for a long time because marinol is produced synthetically and not organically through the plant. Like, what I think through like the FDA's lens, I think it would be the same thing. But I think if you're asking like cannabis consumers or maybe like synthetic organic chemists, they'd be like, it might be just different enough. In theory, it should act relatively the same, but in practice, like there could be small differences because, as you're saying, like the plant might produce a whole swath of different, like slightly different molecules that, yes, they have the same molecular formula, but the way that they're, put together is just so slightly different that it might make it interact with a receptor just different enough. So I
Mhm.
would assume there would be like slight differences, but I think it's kind of a similar conversation of like botanically derived terpenes versus cannabis derived terpenes, which is another like, big argument in cannabis is are they the same thing? If you buy linalool that was extracted from lavender, is that the same thing as linalool extracted from the cannabis plant? A lot of cannabis consumers would say no. It's like it's a different experience altogether. It's a different aroma, it's a different feel, whatever it is. But then again, like the chemist might be like, but in theory it's the same molecule, so shouldn't it be exactly the same? So I think it's depending on like how you view the topic, but I think from like a shallow perspective they are the same. But if you take a really big deep dive, you would identify some slight differences that may contribute to the user having different experiences as well.
I feel like the botanical versus cannabis terpenes, for example, and I've talked to Shauna Vriki about this and Russ Hudson, and we just talked about structural isomers and stuff like that. But really, if you've got the same molecule, both made by plants, they should be the same. However, I think that cannabis has so many of those really potent compounds in very small amounts that when you extract, you also pull those, thiols and things like that out. Not in any sort of measurable amount, but they're there and they're so strong in aroma and taste, the volatile sulfur compounds and things like that. Parts per billion, parts per trillion, we detect those at, right? So
Yes.
you bring those with the extract, yeah, now it's gonna smell, feel, you're be experienced differently than something that came from lavender or a lemon.
Agreed, and I think the problem is when companies like try to recreate an aroma of a plant using isolate from the cannabis plant using isolated terpenes. They might be like, okay, there's this much limonene, there's this much linalool, there's this much osmine, there's this much humulene. I'm just gonna pipette it from these, isolated jars, put it into my vape cart, and it's gonna smell exactly the same as that super lemon haze. And it's like, No, brother. Like there are so many things that aren't on that COA that are even hard to detect if you're looking at a chromatogram. Like if you're looking at the data, it's still going to be hard to recreate that. And really the only way to do it is to put it on the plant to do it. The plant's already doing it. So, that extracted terpene fraction is going to have so much more chemical diversity than
Yeah.
the 8 terpenes that you pipetted together in that vial, and they are going to smell different, they're going to feel different, they're going to be completely different because, like, yes, all plants make terpenes, but the cannabis plant makes an insane variety of terpenes and at insane levels, like really high terpene loads, as you know, as a geneticist.
Yeah, and so I published that aroma paper, got to work with Avery Gilbert, who's a sensory, aroma scientist, and explaining that you like the quantity matters. It's not just a matter of a ratio of 1 to 5 to 4. Like you get those quantities just a little bit wrong, now all of a sudden you've got a completely different aroma profile, and you miss something from that. Like if there's something in really small quantity, it could make a big difference. It can be the difference between something that smells like cabbage and something that smells like chocolate, right? And he was telling a story about there's a bunch of like perfume pirates that recreate perfumes and then sell them for less money than
Oh,
right?
absolutely,
So
yeah.
Chanel number 5 is like one that nobody can nail because there's an ingredient in there, nobody knows what it is, and they just can't get it.
I
As
didn't know that. That's so
yeah, they've
interesting.
tried to reverse engineer it, and I mean, all the science now, but Chanel number 5 is the hardest to recreate, and nobody can nail it down. But we've been watching on social media too, like how come you can't get a real like strawberry flavor or a real mango flavor, like grape? There's that artificial grape, like artificial grape. It doesn't taste like grapes. Have you
No.
ever had anything that really did taste like grapes that didn't have grape in it? Like it seems like some of those natural flavors is just really hard to get. And it's because we never measure everything. Like we're like, oh, we measured 20 of these and 40 of these. And it's like, no, but there's more.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same thing when people are like, oh, well, we don't know everything about cannabis. I'm like, you don't know everything about your chamomile tea you're drinking at night either. But guess what? It relaxes you, it makes you feel good, and it works, and it's safe. So we just keep consuming it, right? That's kind of like the natural products. And, obviously you can take this a step further and be like, even like the spiritual aspect of cannabis, people have tried to quantify that and we haven't been able to, just like we can't quantify like when our soul emerges or like all of these kind of spiritual things about life, about being a human. It's very hard to quantify everything that goes into making a living organism a magical spiritual living organism, and we are trying to quantify that with cannabis, and it's very difficult because we've never been able to do it with any living organism. And to your point too about like terpenes and like ratios and all that stuff, something that bothers me about the cannabis industry is like we always think more is better. Like if a paper is published that says limonene is good for anxiety, then a company is going to be like, "Oh yeah, let's shove, 14% limonene into this vape." And it's like, "No, man, you're missing the point." Like it's like the amount of limonene that's naturally occurring can be good for anxiety, but too much of anything can become toxic. It can have side effects, and it's not going to have the same effects that it did at those low doses in the flower.
Man, they put limonene in cleaning products, right?
Mm-hmm. You can
Like,
smell it.
yeah, goof off and Goo Gone are both like really high in limonene. And it's it says don't get in your eyes, make sure you wear gloves because it's caustic. And you think about, pulling that stuff into your poor soft lung tissue. Yeah, terpenes kind of scare me a little bit.
I actually recently had this conversation with somebody I was working with who said terpenes scared me a little bit because she bought a candle that was like, it had like the aroma of some cannabis strain in it. And she lit it in her office and she's chilling, whatever. And then all of a sudden she's like getting choked out by this smell of this candle. And she's like, I think it's because there's so much terpenes in it. Like there's so many terpenes that it's just making me like have a headache. It's making my eyes water. Like there's just too much in here.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just like a lesson that humans always need is like life's about balance and more is not always better. And we're still unfortunately in that trap in cannabis where it's like is at 34% THC. More, we can get to 40. More, we can get to 42. And it's like, do we need to? Why are we doing all this?
Well, we have concentrates for that, right? Why would you
Yeah,
want a flower that has 40%? Like we keep selecting and breeding for higher and higher phytochemicals. And I think that, we've seen a lot of diseases and herms and just problems in general with our plants. And I think that what we're doing is making them weaker because we're forcing them to, it's almost like slave labor, like they're forced to do this one thing. You must make and if you don't, then you're not going to survive. We're going to cull you and you're not going to make the cut. And it's like, okay, so these plants just only know how to do one thing. And when they get sideswiped with a pathogen or a pest, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, oh no, I'm
that's such
dying.
a good perspective. I've never thought of it like that. As like someone who studies genetics, what do you think is the highest percent THC that is like actually possible from the plant and not manipulated by lab testing data?
That's such a good question. So 35% is what I've heard. And I don't know if that's just THC or if it's total active cannabinoids. So my
Okay.
sort of like viewpoint is 32% is high, very high. 35% is possible. Uh 37% is like improbable. 40% is impossible. That
Hmm.
being said, I also, because you only have so much energy, you've got this vessel that needs to do things to stay alive. So housekeeping genes, you got to, you know, thermoregulate and do all the things that you need to do to stay alive. But if you're putting all your energy into making THC or other compounds, you don't have enough energy left over to do those basic life things. So I do think that there is a cutoff. But that being said, those phytocannabinoids are not actually produced inside the plant. They're produced and stored in the trichomes. And then I think about
Hmm.
pumpkins, right? How big can a pumpkin get? It can get very big, right? There are competitions where they have pumpkins that are gigantic. So,
I'm so glad you're talking about this. Just side note, I'm growing a giant pumpkin this year, and I will talk about this later, but like I'm obsessed with giant pumpkins, and great, great mention there because
so I
they're
don't know if
beautiful.
that's possible, but that's what I'm thinking. Like it's outside the plant. It's not actually inside the plant getting in the way of like, the xylem and the phloem and the things moving around the plant. Like it's outside the plant. So how big can those trichomes get? Of course there's probably a limit. But people talk about good washers. Those are the ones that have the big fat juicy trichomes. There are other, plants that don't get as big, but they pack a hell of a punch. And although they might not be good washers, they're good for, other things. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I'm thinking about giant pumpkins a lot.
Dude, wait, one more question and then back to giant pumpkins. What do you think the highest reasonable amount of terpenes, like percentage, that you think is possible as well?
In the plant, I really
Yeah,
don't have a good feel for that. I mean, I've seen strains that have like 7+%. But I don't trust labs.
I
Like I just
know.
don't trust them. And I don't, and we've known for years that that THC has been inflated to, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But now since a lot of the industry has shifted from THC percent to terpene profiles. Now, why wouldn't they manipulate the terpene results too? So I don't believe COAs that say things like 7%. I think a normal amount for people to look for is like 3%,
I
3.5%.
agree. I think 3% is like a high terpene amount. Like yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah. And I think people should be looking for not just high THC, obviously, not just high terpenes, but like what is your diversity of terpenes in there? Is it you've got three that are really high and then nothing else? Like that to me screams boring as fuck. Like I want to see a lot of different things, like including cannabinoids. Like I want to see THC, I want to see CBD, I want to see CBG, CBC, like C.
THCV, the variants, like
Yeah,
all that
yeah,
fun stuff. Yeah.
yeah. And I want to see like a good diversity of, we only measure ever like 20 to 25 terpenes, but I want to see all of them. I don't want the top three. The top three are always the same like five.
100%. And like I do feel like we're doing like some research in the nose knows right now about how your nose can pick up on terpene profiles or just like personalized medicine better. And I feel like I create way too much content about terpenes and not enough on your nose because as a consumer, I like never look at terpene profiles, which is funny because I talk about it a lot, but I'm always smelling flower. Like I was like gifted this like variety box of all these different pre-rolls. And the way I choose like which one to consume is I just smell them. Like I smell each one. I'm not concerned about THC percentage. I'm not concerned about terpene profiles. I genuinely can smell it and be like, whoa, that's way too uplifting right now. Like that will give me anxiety. Smell a different one and be like, oh, that is just on the mark. Like that's, floral, that's just feels calming and sedating. And I feel like the more we can, one, create an infrastructure where people have the ability to smell products before they purchase them, and then two, like educate consumers on that. It is so intuitive once you start to learn just like to trust your nose and trust your brain. You have so much information in your brain already about like certain smells and how that relates to feels. Like you really don't need to learn every single terpene. You just need to learn to like trust the smell that you're smelling and understand how that results in the effects that you're going to feel.
That's a great point. Yeah, and the problem is that there's a lot of states that don't allow you to smell. So you only have a very limited amount of information that you're given in order to make your decisions.
Yeah.
And even when you do find something that you do like, it's got a name. You're like, I like Blue Dream. When you go somewhere else, the chances of getting that same product, it's questionable. Like you might
Wait,
not find the
wait.
same
You should
thing.
talk about that more. So, like, let's use Blue Dream as an example. Like, what do you think the variability of Blue Dream from every dispensary in the United States, like, how similar do you think Blue Dream is in all of these different And is there a way to measure the level of similarity to some sort of like Blue Dream standard?
There's so many layers to this question. So, and this is the cornerstone of my PhD research, right? I wanted to know how come when I buy Blue Dream from this dispensary, it's different from when I buy it from this dispensary. Because in my brain, I'm like, these are clonally propagated plants. And most of the time, at least in the retail industry, they are. There's some that grow from seed, but you get better consistency in your crop if you do from clones. And so I was like, well, this is weird. So what I did was I drove around and collected, 9 Blue Dream samples, 10 Durban poisons, and just whatever was on the shelf. And actually, Blue Dream was one of the more consistent ones, but
Hmm.
this stems from multiple different things. So, number one, we don't have a database of genetics to say, this is Blue Dream. And that comes from not being able to register plants or, new cultivars like we do in literally every other crop. So, if I'm a hop grower, I spend 12 years developing a brand new hop, which is, you cross things, you pheno hunt, you back cross, you stabilize the genetics so that you get that distinct, uniform, stable genetic, and then you go to the plant variety protection office and you say, I've bred this brand new hop. Here's all of the data that I have. Here's the profile. Here's the genotype. Here's all the things. And they say, great, that's $1 million. It's not $1 million. It's like 5,000. But that, we'll take your registration fee. We'll keep this on file. You own it now. Then you can do licensing. This was a big deal when I don't remember the name of the company, but when Citra hops came out, it was a big deal. And they only had, I think, 2 or 3 licensed growers around the country so that they could control the amount of hops that were out on the market, who was growing it, and who was being able to brew with that. And they were really expensive. And people would just pay like whatever for whatever beer brewed with Citra hops. And so that's like that's the structure in everything else. But we've never had that in cannabis because it's an illegal plant. We can't go to the plant variety protection office. They'll laugh at you.
Right. So, do you know at the Plant Variety Protection Office, like, if you're proposing a new hop genetics, like, does that need to be 20% different than any other hop genetic that's been like what makes a new variety? Or does it just look cool and smell cool and they're like, all
It
right,
has
sick.
to be it has to be novel. It has to be distinct. You have to be able to prove in some way, either genetics, flavor profile, terpene, profile, however, even morphological, like is it bigger? Does it have a more sugar content? Like there's all kinds of ways that you can prove that something is distinct from something else that's already out there. Like tomatoes. How many tomato varieties are there? Or peppers? Like
Hundreds. Yeah.
they all kind of there's red ones, there's green ones, I don't know, there's black ones. But if you've got two red tomatoes, how do you know that this one is beefsteak and this one's aroma? Well, they look different, first of all, different morphology. They taste different. They've got different sugar content. They've got different, genotypes. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you can show uniqueness. But if you're not
Okay.
unique enough, they'll look at it and be like, yeah, no, this is the same thing as this thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure they have, as you said, like kind of orthogonal approaches to look at a bunch of different things, like genetics and phenotype and aroma and bioactive compounds, and then like maybe only one of those you're super distinct in, but if you're super distinct, like that is a new cultivar.
Yeah, and the thing that they also, I mean, I'm sure they were looking at, I don't work for the Plant Variety Protection Office, but if you've got two things that are genetically identical, you put them in different environments with different growers, different nutrients, you're going to come up with two completely different things, and yet they're the
Hmm.
same thing. And so that they have to look at that kind of stuff too, like grapes, right? Chardonnay grapes. You can grow them in France, you can grow them in Napa Valley, but they're going to produce different wines because they were grown in different areas. So those are things that would have to be looked at to determine, is this thing distinct, and all of that, those
So that's a problem that's also paralleled in cannabis, where it's like even if you do have the same blue dream genetics, if they're grown in all of these different areas, what genes are actually activated in that growing condition and what results in the chemistry like might be very different, even if the genetics are the same. So is that something you think is going to be monitored in the future? Is like monitoring like the consistency in genetics as well as output, or like suggested growing conditions for optimal cannabinoid and terpene production?
these are the things that keep me up at night. Like I remember when I was defending my dissertation, somebody asked me like, how are we going to get, consistent phenotypes and chemotypes if we have all these different, indoor versus outdoor? Perfect example, right? But even if you're both indoor, what kind of lights did you use? What kind of nutrients did you use? What was your, watering situation? And even if you are a cultivator that is running the same cultivar from clones every single cycle, you get, I don't know, let's say a thrip infestation. You get it under control really quickly, but that plant is going to respond to that, that pest. It's going to create a different terpene profile. It's good. And even though you kept everything exactly the same, just that introduction of one variable can significantly change your outcome. So now, you've got your favorite dispensary, you've got your favorite strain, Blue Dream. You go in there, you know what you're expecting. All of a sudden, it's completely different. You're like, whoa, what the hell happened? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that standard growing conditions could be utilized in, not like as a rule, like you have to grow it under these conditions, but if you grow this genetic under these specific growing conditions, then you will get this outcome. Any deviation from that is going to create something different, and that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. And it can give the consumer a lot of information. Like, I know I like Blue Dream. This has been verified. I know I like this grower, kind of like a brewer or a chef. Like, pepperoni pizza is pepperoni pizza. You can have the exact same ingredients, but that chef and that kitchen is going to result in a different pepperoni pizza. And same thing with cannabis. So you give them the information, is this, however, it wasn't grown under standard growing conditions. Our, head cultivator, Mateo, has his own special formulation of nutrients that he applies, and then people can start to say, okay, I like the way that these people grow the cannabis, and I know whatever they put out I'm gonna like. So that's kind of how I see it.
I like that. I like leaving room for like the art and the craft and the nature
Mhm.
to come through and it not being like super sterile and consistent. And like, even if there is deviations, I think you'll still get a lot of like the base notes of the blue dream, but it
Mhm.
might just be, it just might bloom in a slightly different way. But I do think, allowing for like growers to kind of keep their secrets too. And as you're saying, like to be like, okay, I know I love Land Valley Farm. I know I love the products that they put out. So, like, even if the Blue Dream's a little different from them, I think I'm going to like that difference. And I'm going to continue supporting the farmers that I want to support because they do a really good job. They, practice organic regenerative practices, XYZ. I think I see the value in having like a certain level of consistency, but at the same time, like it is a natural product and there are going to be natural variations that I think we would be doing a disservice to the plant if we tried to take away all of that variability when in the grow.
Yeah. Yeah, and standard growing conditions can be whatever. You
Yeah.
know, there the way that you brew beer is the way that you brew beer. The way that you make a pizza is the way that you make a pizza. But there is so much nuance in there that, there's so many different products out there. And I think there's room for all of it. Like, I don't always buy box wine, but I do sometimes. It does the
But
job,
when I
right?
do,
Yeah, exactly. I don't always, splurge on a $50 bottle of wine, but every now and then it's like I want to splurge. So, like, and I feel like there's a lot of room there for the market to mature because right now it's a race to the bottom. Like, you have to, if the THC isn't high enough, you're not going to be able to sell it. It's not going to go on the dispensary shelf. The dispensary is not going to be able to, and it's like this vicious cycle. But I think if we kind of get beyond that to where craft farmers can then, because they put so much more into creating and nurturing and their farming methods and all of that, like, people will pay more for quality. That's in everything. People will pay more for quality. We don't always have to buy IKEA furniture. Like, but
I think the Vermont cannabis market is really like a testament to that. Like their cannabis is not cheap by any means. Like it's definitely the most expensive like in New England, but I would also say it's the highest quality. It's very like craft farmer focused. There's a lot of organic sun grown. There's a lot of like really high quality products. But yeah, it's not super cheap, but if you think of all the hours of like love and time that go into that product and all the compliance testing, like right now the infrastructure is not really set up for cannabis to be a cheap product.
is in Vermont, so there's a lot of craft growers. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that it takes less product of a quality flower or product to do the same job as more of a shitty product? Like,
For like consumption,
yeah.
um I think so. I do think so. I mean, I think a lot of these high THC products, I don't think they get you higher. I think it results in a different feeling, but not more medicated feeling. So I think if you have a higher quality, chemically diverse, like quality product, like I do think you would need to use less of it in order to get a similar feeling. But that's just from my perspective. I know I'm sure some people would have a very different perspective of that. And some of these growers too, just the way they educate about their products is really fascinating. I have a couple friends over their name is Snowbird Botanicals, and the way that they like pheno hunt is because they're both medical patients, so they're just pheno hunting for products that make them feel good and alleviate their symptoms. And their flower is some of the best flower I've ever had. Like they have a haze that is purple. Have you ever seen a purple haze? I feel like that is super unique. And usually hazes are like a lot brighter, greener in color compared to like a darker purple. And like it smokes so good, it feels so good, it has the spirit of the plant, it has all their love into it, and like that's what I want to consume at this point in my life. But again, we're all in different areas and different points.
I mean, I don't know. It's so funny, like the way that people kind of treat the cannabis industry as like this, like unique. I mean, it is unique, don't get me wrong, but like this thing that nobody can possibly fathom. And I'm like, but like, you think about fast fashion versus handcrafted, clothing. Do you want to buy a cardigan from Shein or from Walmart that's only going to last one season? Or do you want something that's hand knitted from wool that was sourced on a farm in Tasmania and was hand spun? Like, yes, it's going to cost you a lot more money. It's going to last a lot longer and it's going to feel better. The just everything about it is just better,
And
right?
I think the subconscious intention that is incorporated into like quality products, it's just different. Like it's almost like you want to savor it longer. You want to make sure that you're like really in touch with how that product's making you feel, because maybe you only have so much of it. Even like a rosin product, like rosin is expensive, concentrates are expensive. So maybe you're just using like a little bit of it at a time to make it kind of last longer, and you're like really treasuring every bit that you get out of that, compared to like you have a THC distillate pen that costs $22, and you're just ripping it all day long. Like you're not even
Yeah,
thinking about it because you're like, whatever, when this runs out I'll get another $22 distillate pen. It's just,
right.
it's very different, I think, from a subconscious level, the way that we're medicating with high quality products versus lower quality. And again, like there are substantial barriers to get this to everyone. It is expensive, it is like regionally specific, it is like not every state has a legal regulated infrastructure. So but that's at least how I find myself and my friends like medicating with products differently depending on the quality and chemical diversity.
Yeah, and if you have like a really special product to share with your friends versus like, and maybe you don't share it with all your friends, like not at a party, like that's where they bring the cheap shit. Um, like if you're having like a nice intimate, friend, best friend weekend or something, like that's when you pull out the good stuff just to share with your BFFs, you know?
Well, right. And when everyone's not already like crossfaded, like I'm not going to bring my like best flower and best products to people that are already like, messed up and not going to appreciate it. I'll
Right.
bring that to like an event where I know like my stoner friends are coming over, and they don't drink and they don't do any other like substances. It's just cannabis, and that they're going to like appreciate it. That they're going to take the time, that they're going to like, talk about it. And that's when you want to share like your highest quality products.
Yep, 100%. So going back to the shitty quality and the amount that you need to consume of that, or the amount that you do consume of that, because like you said, it's not special, right? You just blow through it. And so decrease in quality, increase in consumption. You just published some research on CHS. And this is another huge topic, right, of conversation right now is CHS seems to be on the rise, but I feel like there's a whole lot of people that have access to a whole lot of weed at higher concentrations. Also, like back in the day, we used to like if you wanted concentrates, you had to get like hot knives or
Yeah.
make a gravity bomb. Like it was it's not something you could just click your fingers and it would like you had to actually plan. You had to have a hell of a lot of cannabis on hand to make that stuff happen, right? And so that became expensive because prices were very similar to what they are back then as well. Like, it was $100 for, a quarter. Um, and so do you think that the higher, like not only just the access to more products, but also how people are just kind of blowing through cannabis is potentially,
Contributing
contributing?
CHS to the higher levels of CHS. I think it's a few things. Obviously, we don't know exactly what causes CHS, so I'll put that out there immediately. We don't know if it's high doses of THC. We don't know if it's some sort of genetic predisposition. We don't know if it's pesticides. That's a common theory, right? But I do think like if you have a larger pool of people consuming something, you're going to identify more people within that pool that have adverse effects to the substance, right? We see this even with like mental health issues in cannabis. We have more people than ever. We have over 60 million people consuming cannabis in this country. Like, of course, there are going to be some pockets of adverse effects. And I think CHS is just one of those pockets of adverse effects. I think some things that we still need to look into further are like how other drugs, like other pharmaceutical drugs that people are taking, how this interacts with our ECS, and how THC and these other drugs might not be like meshing well in our body, especially with systems like our serotonin system, which is kind of the leading system in charge of like nausea and vomiting, when we have a significant amount of our population also on like SSRIs, and then also heavily medicating with cannabis products. Just conceptually, I think that would make sense if there was some sort of interaction there. But people also say, well, we've been consuming cannabis for centuries and nobody ever had CHS. So like, why is this coming out now? And people have been consuming cannabis for centuries, but not with
Not like
510 thread vape carts and like not in 99% THC purity. So like we've seen an
Not
evolution
and
of
not 30% flour either. Like, back in the day, 100 years ago, the THC percent was probably more like 2 to 4%, not 30%.
exactly. So, I mean, everything has changed in the past, 3 decades, 5 decades, whatever it is. Things have changed a lot. And I think that's what makes it a little difficult to like lock down on exactly what may be causing this rise in CHS. And, anytime you talk about CHS, you get a ton of backlash because people don't want to talk about any negatives of the plant. I don't like talking about negatives of the plant. I'm a consumer of the plant. I'm a lover of the plant. Of course, I don't want to talk about it, but at the same time, like, I get DMs, I care about this community, and like we need to be able to answer these questions for our own community. It shouldn't be just something that we give the pharmaceutical industry to study about cannabis products and cannabis people because we know that narrative is going to be changed. So, in my opinion, we need to do more research on CHS. We don't know exactly what causes it. But there are some trends in the product types and the percent of active compounds in these products, which make it a reasonable pathway to some adverse effects if we are just constantly increasing our dose and the amount of THC. I think, of course, that would lead to some adverse effects in some populations of people over time.
To me, it's crazy that people just can't see cannabis as a plant. There's lots of plants that are irritating or poisonous, toxic, not to everybody, or to, like, tomatoes, for example. They will
Hmm.
irritate your skin. Does it happen to everybody? No. Does it happen to most people? Probably. Peanuts. There's a whole lot of people that are like deathly allergic to peanuts. And other people, it's their favorite thing ever, you know?
And you brought up perfume earlier. This is like a low-key special interest of mine, but perfumers, it's just one of the many. But perfumers will oftentimes not use certain terpenes like linalool in their formulations because it is flagged as an allergen. So it's something that they have to put on the label that says like this product contains linalool. And we don't really think of all the active ingredients in cannabis as potential allergens, but CHS could just be an allergy reaction to certain like terpenes or certain like, active ingredients in the plant as well. Like it could be as simple as that, where people are just like reacting really poorly to one specific compound in the plant. So I think as you're kind of talking about putting in the perspective of other plants and how there are clearly adverse reactions to other plants, and that should kind of just be expected with cannabis as well. I think that's kind of like the more mature perspective to take rather than this doesn't exist. People must be making up their symptoms.
Yeah. Like I'm super allergic to both pine pollen and cannabis pollen. Like I've
Yeah.
had a couple of male. I can when I was growing hemp in the forest, we would have about one plant every 2000 would herm, and I knew it. I knew there was something in the greenhouse as soon as I would walk in because I just start sneezing and my eyes would start watering and I'm like, there's a fucking male in here.
Oh my God, you should rent out your body for that.
I
Just
know.
like,
I'll sniff it out.
yeah, literally invite me to your grow and I'll let you know if there's the male in here. That's funny.
But yeah, so if the pollen can be that allergenic, like there's got to be other stuff in the plant that's, allergenic to some people. And I know that I've had adverse effects from linalool and limonene specifically. Like those things will make me cough and sneeze, and my throat will kind of close up, and I hate
Yep.
it. So
And
I
both
feel,
of those are flagged as allergens. Those are like
yeah,
two of the common ones that perfumers stay away from because it's not just like for that person wearing the perfume, but also if you spray that perfume on you and now you're walking around all of these other people, like that's a potential adverse effect that the people around you in that room could be
yeah,
exposed to when you're I actually since being pregnant, I think the concept of wearing perfume is like crazy. I think it's like crazy that we spray ourselves with these like honestly sometimes like hormone disrupting like really powerful scent compounds and then we just like wear them all day long and huff them and then subject all the people around us to those same smells and then when there's multiple people wearing perfumes and colognes they're just like mixing in the air and we're supposed to like huff those in. It just like changed because I was so sensitive to smell. It just like changed the way that I viewed aroma in general.
Yeah, your heightened sense of smell and the things that make you nauseous and that it just smells and tastes, right?
Yeah.
I used to love green olives. As soon as I got pregnant, like couldn't stand green olives all of a sudden. I'm okay with them now, but I was disappointed for a long time not being able to eat green olives. Like,
It changes so much about like just the way you experience sensory things in general. And I
mm,
feel like my appetite still is not like fully back. Like I feel hunger and then I go to eat and I'm like, ugh, I
mhm.
don't want to eat this right now, but I know I have to eat this. But it's just like, oh, it's just like such a different relationship with like foods and smells and feels and all those things.
Yeah, one of the other foods for me was cereal. Like if I put it in my mouth, it's not off-putting, but there's just something about cereal that
I feel like it's very much a cereal's like very much like a pregnancy craving for a lot of people. And then like you have your baby and you're like, I'm done, no more. That was kind of gross.
Yeah. Uh, so going back to being able to smell something before you purchase it and trusting your nose, I was gonna say, I feel like that's kind of intuitive, but we don't think about it for cannabis. But like before you eat something, if it's a new food, you're gonna smell it. If you don't like the smell of it, you probably won't eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, like I really like Vegemite. Do I like the smell of Vegemite? No, it smells like vitamins. Will I eat it? Yes, because it's delicious. So it doesn't work for everything, but it's a pretty good indicator if you are gonna like something or not. So I feel like that's a really important point to make. And I do like, you know, not full on deli style. I mean, after COVID and everything, I feel like that's a little weird, but they
I've
make
seen some sketchy deli styles where I'm like, why are you letting people put their whole face in that that
right, right.
giant jar?
They have the little jars with like it's got a
Yes.
little magnifying glass and a light and it's got open so you can smell that. Like I like that. You can also have a little jar of something and switch it out or
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know. But
That's an
um
important topic though, because yeah, like I feel like when people think of deli style, like they think you have to put like a pound of cannabis in a mega jar and let people smell it. But like
yeah,
there are tasteful ways to do deli style where it's like still clean and you're not contaminating all of that product by letting, 400 people shove their nose and their face in it. But yeah, I feel like, I think the reason why I'm gravitating towards talking about that more is one, that's how I choose my products. So, like, of course, I should talk about that more. But two, like, the way we talk about cannabis, we're kind of like expecting consumers to have a full lesson on chemistry and pharmacology in order to be able to find a cultivar or strain that works for them. And it's just too much for most people. Like, I've spent a lot of time in dispensaries over the past year because I've been doing book signings and like events and all this stuff. And the more people you talk to, they're like, yo, I don't care about that. Like, I just don't, like, I don't want to know that. Of course, some people do. Like, uh, our nerdy community loves to nerd out about it. And I think we should still offer that information.
yeah,
But for your regular day to day consumer, being like, oh, well, you have to learn about your top 10 terpenes and your top 10 cannabinoids in order to make a decision, that's really difficult. Whereas if we just smell something, like if something smells bright and sharp and uplifting versus something that smells more rounded and dull and sedating, like that in your body based on like as you said, like cleaning agents often smell really bright and uplifting, or smelling like a citrus peel, or even smelling like in the morning you pour a glass of orange juice. Like that same smell is part of like that morning routine, that bright, uplifting morning routine. Whereas nighttime, we brought up chamomile before. Like
mhm,
chamomile is a very like mellow smell. It's very honey. It's like you have that bisbolol, you have that like really calming smell that's just kind of part of it. Same thing with lavender. Your body knows that those smells are good for nighttime and that they're not
yeah,
super bright and uplifting. But I think we need to like let people know that they have this tool that they can start to like leverage a little bit more, and they should learn to trust it because it's kind of like the best way you have to figuring out not just what products to buy, but if you are someone who's a little bit weed rich and you have like five different varieties at home, how do you choose which one to consume when? You smell
right.
it, you smell the different varieties and go, ooh, this one's speaking to me right now. that's the one I'm going to consume.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I had a thought and then I lost it, but that's okay.
That's okay. I will come
But
back. You're good.
maybe. Um, oh, it came back for just a second and then it left again.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, you're probably familiar with like, I think it was like 2012, SC Labs and the Emerald Cup came up with that like new way of classifying cannabis where you have like your Jackson Haze, you have your tropical and citrus, floral and earthy, OG gas and chem, and like exotics.
Hmm.
Do you think, based on like your knowledge of genetics, that those are reasonable categories to to kind of further classify cannabis beyond just like indica sativa hybrid? Or like what way do you think we can kind of further delineate the types of products that exist?
Oh man, you ask such good questions.
These
I
are the things that keep me up at night, so I figured they might keep
Yeah,
you up at night.
the categorization. So people don't like the indica hybrid sativa thing because it's not super informative. I
Right.
would argue, however, though, that for noobs who, like you were just saying, s- get overwhelmed with the amount of information that they're slammed with at the counter, like, and they just don't, they're like, I don't care. I just give me something that will get me high.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in that respect, indica and sativa, you say, okay, you're brand new, try this one and try this one. They are completely different. See which one you like better. Now they can attach a name to the one that they like. And it might be I like sativas at night and I like indicas during the day, which would be totally opposite from what, you
Right.
know. But everybody reacts to substances differently, including coffee. A person with ADHD is going to feel calm from coffee, not what I experienced, which is getting, whatever. Same thing with like, Adderall, Ritalin, there's all kinds of stuff that you don't react exactly the same to everything. And so I think the indica and sativa are great buckets to start with, like wine and beer. Do you like wine or do you like beer? Like, does that tell you specifically what that
Or
product?
like red wine and white wine,
Exactly.
start. I agree to it be, our industry is like such a hater on this topic, and if you talk to anyone,
Yeah.
they're like, those words have no right to be in dispensaries. But I agree, like. I think our industry kind of leaves out the newbie, the new consumer, and
Yeah,
being like, okay, well, if the only words they know are indica and sativa and hybrid, like, let's meet them where they're at. Let's start there.
exactly.
And then once they have a better understanding of that, then we can get into like terpenes
Yeah.
or nose or like cannabinoids or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
but don't make them feel stupid the second they walk in the door. Like meet them where they're at and like give them a positive experience and then build off their knowledge over time. It doesn't all need to be conveyed on the first visit to the dispensary.
Right. You don't need to be a patisserie chef to enjoy a piece of cake, you know?
Hmm.
And even if you're in a fine dining restaurant, like, do you really want to know exactly how the chef prepared this and that or the other? Like, the waiter or waitress might give you all of that information at the start, and you're like, I don't even know what you just said. Like,
Yeah.
you had me at chocolate cake. All the other stuff, yeah, anyway. So I think, I talk a lot about categorization, because there's indica and sativa is not a thing. I do think it's a thing, and the reason that I think it's a thing is because it used to be based on morphology and, the geographical area where that plant adapted to, which means that they adapted to different pests, pathogens, and pressures in those different environments, which means those two plants probably produce different chemicals. Are they THC and CBD? No. Are they the terpenes that we're looking at? No. We've already figured that out, at least on a surface level through research. But we haven't looked everywhere. We haven't looked at all the chemicals. Haven't looked at the whole genome. And so I
Mm.
feel like these little tiny differences might be that indica sativa split that we haven't even figured out yet. So to say that there's no such thing is really a little bit crazy to me. The second thing that people say that really annoys me is strain names don't mean anything. And I get it. And
Mm.
actually a lot of that comes from my research. And I'm like, that's not what I said at
You're like,
all.
I created the
I
problem.
didn't say that. I do think they're meaningful. And I get where people are coming from that you can buy Blue Dream, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the same Blue Dream every single time because we know that sometimes, it's genetically different or it's been grown in a different environment, so it has a different profile. However, this is not a problem that is unique to cannabis, right? We know that this is a big problem in the fish industry, right? You don't get to see the fish's face when you buy a fillet at the well, you don't. Like they fillet it at the supermarket or it comes
Yeah,
with your sushi. Like how are you supposed to identify what kind of fish that is? You just have to trust what's on the menu or that the cook was given the right fish. Like
damn, I've never thought about this. Yeah,
right?
I
So it's the
agree.
same thing with
Yeah,
cannabis. You get a bag, it looks you like don't get to see that plant growing. You don't know anything about it. It looks like flower, and some flower looks a little like a little bit different, but very hard to identify. You can smell it, but there's so many different types of cannabis that you can have similar profiles, and it would be really hard for most people, the vast majority of people, to identify what that cannabis is by that smell. And so I don't, and names are the way that people communicate.
yeah.
If somebody tells me Riley Kirk is coming to this cannabis show, I immediately you pop into my head. I know who Riley Kirk is. Will there be another Riley Kirk at this cannabis conference potentially? Does that mean that your name doesn't mean anything, or her name doesn't mean, or his name doesn't mean anything?
There
No.
isn't. There's another gentleman on the internet named Riley Kirk. I found by Googling myself. Side
Yeah.
note.
So there's two Russ Hudsons, and Russ, he doesn't like that. This other guy, he's a woo-woo like astrology kind of guy, but he's an author too. So when you Google Russ Hudson, there's Russ Hudson, the scientist terpene master, and then there's this other guy, Russ Hudson. Does that mean that Hudson is not a meaningful name? No, it doesn't. Okay, they're different people with the same name.
Yeah,
So I that's how I kind of feel like in cannabis, it still gives you an idea of what it is, you know?
yeah.
We know who Russ Hudson is. I also know who the other guy is. So maybe I need a little more information to figure out which Russ Hudson are we talking about? Which Riley Kirk are we talking about? But so I don't like it when people say names are meaningless because they're not. They are
Well, it's
meaningful.
also I agree that they're meaningful and they're valuable, and it's also like if you try to take that away, you're taking away so much of the culture and the history of the plant, and it's like you can't do that. You cannot separate the history of the plant from like where we want to be because that's never gonna work well, right? Maybe you can add on to it like as we were talking about like what makes a blue dream a blue dream? Is there a certain amount of like
Right.
genetic consistency, whatever that is? But just to like remove strain names to make it like more consistent in like a pharmaceutical framework to be able to name them like, you know, phenotype 1, phenotype 2, or like, you know,
Yeah.
chemotype 1, whatever it is, you know, that in my opinion is too far removed from where we were to where like some people want to go. So I would agree with that. I also want to ask you, you said that we don't understand the whole genome of the cannabis plant. So we haven't mapped the whole genome. Like where are we at with that in the research?
So so we have kind of. So the whole genome was published in 2012. And
Hmm.
so that's quite a while ago, right? That's
Yeah,
what, almost 15 years ago now. But the assembly of the genome still isn't complete. We don't have all the chromosomes assembled. We've got it down pretty well. And I think a lot of that work comes from medicinal genomics, but they're mapping to their own reference. So I
right.
don't know, and like who decided the reference? And if we do find differences, is it like how do we know that's the one that will show us the difference? And and I don't know the answer to that. Like I think we need a lot more information. We need a lot we just need more information to figure this out because my brain goes to I don't know if you know this, but they're the golden warbler and the blue-winged warbler. They're
Ah,
totally
you're a
different.
bird person.
Well, once you hit 40, you're like, hmm.
You
Um,
just get
so
sent a book by the Audubon Society and you're like, it's time.
no, actually, this guy that did this research, he came and did a seminar at my university, and I thought it was so interesting because these two species, they look completely different. They have different songs. They live in different areas. They're different species. They differ in only 6 places in the genome, with just by
Whoa.
a couple of nuclear. Like they're very similar genetically, and yet they're so different. And I'm like, I think that's where we're going to find the indica sativa split. And so
Mm.
until you do a complete comparison, and there's like, do we even have any more like pure sativas? I think we need to go back to land races and things like that, like actually go to the places where the sativas were produced and go to the place where the indicas were, and then like actually look at these things.
Yeah,
um
go to like Afghanistan, go to Jamaica, go to like
yeah,
all these places where they've been like growing in similar ways with similar genetics for like a long time.
yeah, so I really don't like this hard and fast like, It's not a thing. I'm like, I don't know, man. We've been talking about this for a long time, and people say it's a thing. I think as scientists, it's more responsible to say we haven't found the answer yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you think that do you think there's still some cannabinoids that we maybe just haven't isolated and discovered yet? And if so, do you think that they're expressed already, or do you think that we just haven't like set the right growing conditions for the plant to be able to produce them?
I mean, we are discovering new compounds. It seems like every year we're finding something new. It was THCP, and then and that's only found there was THCV. We knew about THCP. THCP was new, and now some of abstracts is finding the flavorants and the Tropicana sulfurs
Yeah.
and these things that are found in incredibly small amounts. I think that there is like I don't my mom says not all the science is in yet. And I agree with that. Like I do think that yeah, I think there's still stuff that we haven't found. Not only that, but this plant is not like stuck. It's there evolving. Like there are still
Mm,
mutations that are going to happen. There are still conditions that it's going to try to adapt to. Like the fact that we keep culling males and we keep the females away from the males and they're never allowed to set seed. Like I feel like the females are not going to really be down with that. Like they really want to make seeds. They really want to put their, genetics through to they want to have a next generation. They want it the survival of the fittest and selfish gene and all of that, and by us doing what we do, I don't know that that's sustainable. And I think that we're going to see changes in the plant as he, they, them, they adapt to what we are doing to them. We are very
mm.
manipulative of this plant. We refuse to just let it do its thing because it doesn't want to make all these terpenes and cannabinoids. Like that's not its goal in life. That's our goal for their life, which is so rude.
Dude, sometimes when I see nugs, and I know this is what I'm supposed to think is a quality nug, when it's like sparkling and it's like, you know what I'm talking about, like that,
Oh
like
yeah.
super, like literally flooded with trichomes. You can't even like see the green plant material underneath. I'm like, ew, what'd you do to that thing? Like, calm down. That is not the weed I like to smoke. Like, you're doing too much. You're doing too much to the plant. And, when people show me these nugs, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty, it's cool, it's whatever. But like, that's just, I don't know. It's like we're manipulating it too much, kind of what you're talking about. And it's kind of just skewing like we've touched it too much. It doesn't look like its natural form. Whereas like, the weed I love to smoke is like, the Humboldt County outdoor grown flower. Like that is, you can't touch even close to the quality of that flower. And I think that's closer to its purest form of like what you're talking about with some of these landrace varieties and where they've traditionally been, cultivated. I think that's more similar to that, and you get a different feeling. And yeah, the nugs are not that pretty. Like sometimes they're
Right.
really not gorgeous at all. But then you smoke them, or then you roll them, and they essentially roll themselves. It's just like so perfectly dried and cured, and like so smokable. And you're like, this is what more people need to experience, and this
Yeah.
will shift the way they think about cannabis if they can consume this type of sun-grown flower.
Yeah, I think we're doing new consumers a disservice. Like I feel like there's a lot of people more recently saying, I just don't like it. Like I've tried it and I don't like it. And it didn't used to be that way, pretty much everybody when I was in college the first time. Everybody would smoke weed. And it was few and far between, but now I feel like there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't know, it makes me anxious or, you know, adverse effects. And yeah, I do think we've really come a long way, not for the better necessarily, by our manipulation.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is, of course we have higher potency products now, but like the proposed serving size is also like egregiously large a lot of the time. Like, like pre-rolls are 1 gram joints. That's kind of like a shitload of flour for a lot of people. Like that's a lot. Whereas like back, in say like the 70s and stuff, a lot of people would roll little pinners, like just a little bit, enough to take the edge off and share with a friend. You weren't necessarily consuming these like absolute cannons all day long. And I think that is a part of it too, is like the dosing has, the perceived dosing has changed as well.
Well, and even again, like, talking about pinners back in the 70s, that weed was like 2 to 4%.
Yeah.
You've got gram pre-rolls that are 30%, and sometimes they're even infused with more. And it's like, who the hell's gonna smoke that much weed? Like, oh my God. No wonder there are people out, and noobs don't know that. They don't know, they haven't experienced the evolution of cannabis throughout our lifetimes. And have they seen the Cheech and Chong movie? I don't know, probably not. But like, yeah, it's really, really different. And so if they buy a pre-roll and they're like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to smoke this like a cigarette, like, whoa, dude. Like, no wonder you didn't enjoy yourself. That sounds like a horrible time.
Yeah. And you forget that new people don't know how to roll. And like rolling is like a skill of autonomy that allows you to like, you can mix in CBD flower, you can mix in THC flower, you can roll a pinner, you can roll a fatty, you can, put in an extra crutch, you can, whatever you want to do, you can like customize it to
Mhm.
your personalized needs. But again, like even like the little dog walker joints that are sold at dispensaries, that still might be too big for some people. And again, like that is kind of marketed as like a lower dose product because it is smaller, but like to a brand new consumer, that still might be too much. We might need to move towards like a one hitter. Like a one hitter is the right dose for a lot of people, especially people who don't have a tolerance and they're like just starting to get into it. Yo, take it easy. Just take one hit. Those little tiny chillums are a great tool for regulating your use.
Yeah, like it's okay. You're still cool if you can't smoke a whole joint.
Yeah, like you're still really cool. You can still hang.
When I was at MJ Unpacked, I brought a whole bunch of CBD flower, and I have a type 2 that I got from Colin Clark. It's like, I think it's like 7% C or THC and like 12% CBD. It's
Wow.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Like one bowl of that is perfect. And I love it. And I shared it with my friend Chad because he's never had type 2, and he's like, telling me, and I was like, just try this. And he's like, that is fucking phenomenal. I'm like, I know, it's really great. And I
So
feel
great.
like there's so much more to cannabis than THC. And a lot of people just don't ever get exposed to that because everybody in the industry pushes THC so hard, including the bud tenders, but that's kind of their job.
It
But
is, unfortunately.
speaking of
Yeah.
bud tenders, you were talking about overwhelming the consumers with information, but the amount of information that we expect bud tenders to know and to be able to guide people, especially when it comes to people who come in and go, I have anxiety, which do I take? It's like, dude, you don't get paid enough to do that. Like,
Mm-mm.
you don't expect everybody in, a person at the checkout in a grocery store, you don't expect that person to know everything about every single product on the shelf. It's like, where do I find pasta? Aisle 7. That's about the extent of it. They say,
That's
did you
it.
find everything today? No, I couldn't find the Coca-Cola. Oh, it's in aisle 15. Like, that's it, and maybe the code for bananas and
Yeah, and I think that is something that will change with Schedule 3 too, is like the need for more educated medical people for the consumer, for the medical consumer. And I know some dispensaries are doing a really good job of this, but even a lot of adult use recreational consumers are still asking medical questions at the counter. And honestly, like bud tenders probably know more than most people about these topics. But it is kind of a liability too to have somebody who's not well versed in medicine and the ECS, talking about that with consumers. So I've always said that we need more education with medical professionals, and hopefully we can finally get it too. But who
uh,
knows?
and I would say even for the recreational consumer, like they are called bud tenders, which kind of, echoes bartender.
Yeah.
You go up to a bar and you just turned 21 yesterday, and the bartender says, "What do you want?" And you're like, "I have no idea. Like, I've never drank before because I'm a good girl."
So she
They're gonna
has Long Island iced tea.
right, double rum and coke, a shot of whiskey. No, but they're
Yeah.
gonna ask you some questions like, "Do you want something fruity? Do you want something bubbly? Do you like, not sweet? Do you want sweet, not sweet?" Like they're gonna ask you some really generic questions that will help them figure out what they can give to you that you will enjoy. They're not just gonna put down a shot of tequila and be like, "There you go." That's
Yeah.
what everybody orders.
Everybody reacts really positively to this. I'm sure you will too.
Yeah.
Actually, so speaking of like walking into a dispensary and buying products, I think this is something that you've also published in before of like what research material is available for government funded researchers to study cannabis? Because this is also changing, I think. But like
Yeah.
what is the like the current infrastructure? And I think you published a paper on this that was
I did, and I'm not super up on what's going on currently. My understanding is that I think there's about seven different growers resources that you can get research material from. However, traditionally for the last 50 or so years, there's only been one supplier, and that was the University of Mississippi through the National Institute of Drug Abuse. They were tasked with providing research grade marijuana to anybody who wanted to do research on marijuana. And back in the day, when they very first started the program, they had something like 100 different cultivars. So they had quite a,
whoa.
yeah, they had a big range of different kinds of cannabis that they were growing, which is great. That program changed over the 50 years. And when I did my research in, I don't know, 2018, something like that, I had access to that research grade marijuana. And they had, I think it was 12 different things that you could order, and they didn't have names. It was low THC, low CBD, low THC, medium CBD. And so all of the combinations of low, medium, high, very high
Yeah.
of
Okay.
THC and CBD, no other compounds were measured. And so I got my hands on high THC, low CBD, and very high THC, low CBD, and tested those. And just looking at the product, it didn't smell like anything. So the terpenes were all gone, just not even there. And it was just leaves and stems and sticks, just all kind of like shake, but Mexican ditchweed shake, you know? And I was like, okay, well, that sounds terrible, right? And when I tested it genetically, not only was it devoid of terpenes and only the THC and CBD were being measured, it was really genetically distinct from anything you can purchase on the shelf currently, and really different than cultivated hemp, including the fiber and grain types and the CBD types, which is concerning if you think about it. But also, there haven't been that many research projects done on smokable cannabis. So it's not like all of the information that we know about cannabis is null and void and we have to redo everything. It's just
True.
like
Yeah.
glaucoma is the example where, the government would supply you with your joints for the month. They'd come in a big, wheel and all your little joints were in there. And it sounds terrible, but, I've heard El Soli, he's the program director. I've heard him talk before, and really what it was is not that they were trying to grow shitty weed and give it to the public to prove that it doesn't work. Um, his task was to provide research grade marijuana, which means that it needs to be a very consistent product. The patients need to get the same thing every single time in order to gather the data on that product. It can't be variable. And as we know, cannabis is
Yeah.
very variable from grow to grow, from plant to plant, and even within the same plant. So you can't use like whole bud product for that kind of research because even from bud to bud, you're going to get different levels of THC, CBD, terpenes, everything. And so the solution to that with plant medicine is to grind it all up and then, have your set THC CBD ratios. If it's too high, you cut it with leaves and stems and sticks and stuff. So now you've got your 13% weed, it's now at 10%, which is what it should be. So it
Yeah.
sounds terrible, but I totally understand it. But there's still the argument that you're using research material that literally nobody has access to.
Yeah.
So whatever your findings are on that material is not translatable to any person who can buy cannabis anywhere, not even your CBD, types. So I think that that is changing where normal cultivators can actually cultivate for research purposes good flower that is much more um close to what people actually can get their hands on to medicate themselves.
Which is great, yeah. Just the thought of smoking that shake just feels harsh in my throat. But yeah, I know that they expanded it so a few other growers were able to get licenses and then more researchers were able to use that material. But I just saw just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I think another bill is being proposed so that the researchers can actually go to a dispensary and just buy products that are available to people and research those, which to me, like, that's what we need. That's like literally bottom of the barrel stuff that we need. We need to be able to study the products that medical patients are
Yeah.
currently using and consuming to help them, because then we can tie like user outcomes to the actual physical products that people are purchasing and like the testing standards and all of that stuff. So I'm really hoping that that bill goes through. I wish I remembered the name of it, but I don't. I think it's something Research Expansion Act. I don't know, but
Oh, I think I saw that too. I don't think I read it though.
you
Most
can
probably.
read it if it passes and goes
Yeah.
through. I think it was just being proposed at that point.
I think it's really you touched on some points there that I think is really important. So currently in cannabis, like we've got the breeders who breed something that they like. We've got the cultivators who grow what they like. We've got the dispensaries who purchase what they like. And we're giving that to the consumer. Do we really know what the consumer wants, or are we just telling them this is what we're giving you, these are your choices? Because like I said before, like I don't think that the consumer even knows, right? They don't have, how are they ever supposed to develop preferences if they're not even offered the wide array of flower that is out there? And the poor cultivators are like, I don't want to grow 30% weed. And it's like tough.
Yeah.
You have to, because or I don't want to grow huge yielders. Like I'd rather have some quality, you know, craft, blah blah blah. Um and then, there's the issue of nobody's checking the genotype. So, you put the name on it. Is that name really match the genotype? Or, even if it is a different kind of blue dream, it's Riley's blue dream. Okay. So
Hmm.
now we've given a little bit more information. This is Riley's blue dream. We've checked it. But there's also John's blue dream and Bob's blue dream and Anna's blue dream. And they're all a little bit different. But now you've honed in on Riley's blue dream as the thing for you. So then, as a consumer, you would then look for Riley's Blue Dream at any dispensary, and only then can we start connecting experiences back to genotypes and potentially chemotypes. Because as we talked about before, like you can have the same genotype with completely different chemotypes depending on how that was grown. Um, and I think that all of those pieces of information are super important. And it's so crazy that we've been using this plant for so long, and that basic information we haven't figured out yet.
I agree. Do you think I know you're working on some like new genetic projects. Do you
Mhm.
think the projects you're working on are going to be able to help solve that problem of being able to like, tag a certain product as Riley's Blue Dream genotype? Like, do you think that's in the future coming up, like within the next 5 years?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I've been working on this project called TrueCut. Shameless plug. Um,
You got it.
um, but yeah, I've been working on this project called TrueCut. And what we aim to do is take a cultivator or a breeder, send something in, and it really doesn't matter what it is. You possess it, you've been growing it, you've been cultivating it, you've got your SOPs down, and whatever. It, you send it in to us, we can genotype it and say, okay, this is Riley's blue dream. You don't own all the blue dreams, but this one
Right.
you do own. And we can get the genotype of that, and we can get the chemotype of that, and we can put on the bag, or we can send it to the cultivator. The cultivator can grow it knowing that this is Riley's blue dream. Okay, love Riley's blue dream, hate Bob's blue dream. It's not a yielder, it's not a washer, it's just crap. Don't know what Bob did to his blue dream, but it's not the same, right? So then the cultivator can put on the bag that it's been verified genetically, and then they can go home and fill out a survey, and then now we can connect Riley's blue dream to patient outcomes or consumer outcomes, and kind of better understand, like, do these things really, I don't know, like kind of connect some dots there.
Yeah, so is that dependent on like the genetic repository that you have? So like being able like do you need say 20,000 samples before you're eventually able to like identify that Riley's cut of Blue Dream is, genetically unique and can be like is the goal for it to be patentable to have that like genetics be patentable or is
I
it
mean,
really just about like labeling and tying back to consumer experience?
I think it's more about number one, IP protection. So a lot of these breeders, like they spend a lot of time, crossing and selecting and pheno hunting, and a lot of them are well, a lot of them don't care, but there's quite a few that are, they know once they bring it to market, like it's gone. Anybody can
Yeah.
grow it, anybody can rename it. Like I guess renaming isn't always the best strategy because if it's really popular, like backwards example, but there's a strain called Becky that nobody really wanted. They renamed it toad venom. Now it's like the hottest thing in California.
Is that the story of toad venom? I've been waiting to ask someone about toad venom. I feel like so left out on the East Coast. I'm like, what is going on
Apparently,
with toad venom?
apparently Becky isn't sexy, but toad venom is. So anyway, um, but yeah, so whoever owns toad venom, whoever created that and has it, like they can get it genetically sequenced and then they can license it out because it's their cut of that particular cultivar. And then it's the licensing agreements, right? That are the thing that's defensible in court. So you and I have a licensing agreement, and then all of a sudden you don't come back and renew your licensing agreement, but yet you still have this flower that you're growing. Well, where did you get that?
Mm,
Right. So, and then the more samples that we have, they'll all kind of feed off of each other, and it'll get more robust and more fine scale. The and just become, yeah, just more robust as it goes on. And something that I see being really valuable to this is people who have specific conditions and need a specific type of cannabis that they have identified but don't know where to always find it. It's not always available. Like a friend of mine, Andrea, here in New Jersey, we don't have home grow, right?
mm,
So she either has to rely on what's at the dispensary or she needs to rely on other cultivators to grow her medicine. She knows what the name of it is.
yeah.
It's a grapefruit something. She's purchased other cannabis with the name grapefruit. It's a grapefruit cross, whatever. Does it work? No. Um, but if she could identify, like put her cut in our True Cut universe, then she could see what other cultivars are taking up that same genetic space and better target where she should be looking for her medicine. And it's not based on, a grapefruit over here and a grapefruit over there. Oh, does this have the same terpene profile? Does this, because it's probably not the terpenes that are her medicine, it's probably something else in the plant. So being able to look in genetic space and being like, this is where I need to be looking. That's better targeted medicine than currently is available. Same thing with dispensaries. You run out of something that's fire, get in there and see what else is available that's going to be similar to that genetically, much likely to be phenotypically the same.
Makes so much sense. So a patient could even like be like, okay, well, I tried this, Riley's cut a blue dream. It was awesome. They could go into some like website and be like, where else can I find the same cut? Like what dispensaries near me,
Hmm.
have the same cut so that I don't need to waste my time trying all the blue dreams nearby. I can just go get this
Well, and all
exact
the
same product.
blue dreams might be all over the place. Like
Right.
Riley might be here, but there might also be like a blue haze or a, I don't know, a blue cloud or a, something's named something. There might even be a Jack Hare in there that's, for whatever reason is taking up the same genetic space. It's probably not Jack Herrera, but
Yeah.
but that's the name, and it's now linked to, a genotype, and so if she could find any of those things, that they will more likely be similar to what she needs.
So cool. So where are you guys at with this project? Like, are you currently like, are people submitting samples that you're starting to work with? Or like, are you accepting new clients? Like, where are you, in case there's a listener who's like, yo, I got some really cool genetics that I want to be able to tag.
Yeah, so the project is going. We've got, I think we've got 85 samples in the universe right now, and we've got another, I think 16 that are getting sequenced right now. But, we've been talking about this, and really what we need is a ton of samples. We're going to shoot for 3,000 just to start. So we need money to do that.
Yeah.
And in order to get money, we need customers. And it's only $400 a year to do this, by the way. And we do it yearly because cannabis is like fast fashion. Like what's popular today, next year might not be popular. It could be popular for 20 years. Who knows?
So true. Yeah.
But you don't want to spend $5,000 genotyping something that isn't gonna be popular anymore, or do a plant patent that is only as good as your patent attorney and takes years and tens of thousands of dollars to even get. So we modeled it to make sure that it can evolve with the industry preferences and changes because it changes so fast. But yeah, so we're looking for basically investors so that we can get the sequencing, we can do some marketing, we can make sure that the website's functioning so that we can, potentially even give some legal support to people when they need it, or at least send them to the right place. And in order to do that, we need to have, people who want to pay us the $400, but also when we get some investor money, like we just want to get, like whole tissue culture libraries. We've got friends who have like 160 cultivars in their tissue culture library. We just want to sequence it. And honestly, as soon as we sequence it, it gets that time and date stamp, which means that if somebody has a problem down the road, they can be like, oh my God, like I've got a problem. Okay, activate your account and we'll give you your dossier that you can then use in court.
Wow, yeah, court protections for genetics is like unheard of right now. That would be insane. But like you've kind of talked about it with other plants and like why would cannabis be any different? Like we need like these breeders put so much time and energy and as you said like the second it's released it's kind of just like poof, gone right now. So I think that would definitely give them some more incentive to like keep creating awesome new cuts.
And even the incentive to start stabilizing some of these genetics because everything out there is polyhybrid crosses. Like they're not, you get F1 seeds, cool, but you take you go to F2 and you've got all kinds of phenotypes. And even within F1 seeds, you might have three or four different phenotypes because there's nothing, there's no parents that are homozygous to cross to get that even canopy, whatever. So and that's something yeah, that's market maturity, and it is a crop. It is a huge economic crop, a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar industry. And we're not only just, creating a crop for food, like this is medicine, this is food, this is fun, this is pharmaceuticals, this is potentially fuel, like
Yeah,
biofuel
fiber,
and
fuel, yeah,
yep,
all of it.
all of the things. And so yeah, like this market needs to change because a breeder might sell a cut for $15,000, sometimes way, way more than that. But that $15,000, is that enough to know that it's just poof gone forever? Like you're never going to get any more revenue, at least off of that guy who's going to give it to one of his friends who's going to sell it potentially to the other guy. Like all of that money should be coming to you for all of your hard work. And I don't understand why people in this industry just kind of are like, it's cool. Like if somebody ripped off your book, by the way, Reefer Wellness, I have it too.
Oh, thank you.
But if somebody like started selling this in their classroom or, whatever, like you're gonna be like, bruh, no. Like
Yeah.
that's my
What?
book I created. You can't resell my book. That's
Yeah.
not okay in any industry. And I don't like it's just crazy to me that we're just like, okay, well, it's just how it is in cannabis because it doesn't have to be that way. We just need a new model.
Oh, I think it's so cool. And what a cool way to use your genetics background is like to do that and to fill a niche that is needed in the cannabis industry, especially moving towards like Schedule 3 and the need for like consistent genetics, especially if things are going to go through the government pipeline, like they're going to have to be able to demonstrate consistency in genetics, consistency in chemotypes, consistency in growing conditions. Like all of it is going to have to be within like a variance of like 1% maximum. Like it's going to have to be super consistent. So I feel like the timing's just like working out really well for you.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, this has been a dream of mine since I've, first got my very first results back when I was a baby PhD candidate. Um, just seeing that there's some strains that are super consistent and others that are just all over the place. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually know what we're purchasing instead of just guessing? And I feel like that's coming soon. We've needed it for a long time, and there's been a lot of attempts at it, but I don't think anybody has created such a cohesive whole industry ecosphere to do this, where you get checks and balances at every point to give you information. And with machine learning and AI too, we might even be able to use this information and data to help guide breeding projects. Like
Oh,
if
yeah.
I take this and this, what am I going to get? Like, what's the likelihood of this outcome or figure that out. Or conversely, if I want to get this, what should I breed? Like if I want this flavor
Mm.
profile or this, like what's the most likely that this could be an outcome? And I think machine learning and AI can help us with that.
Dang, that's gonna get crazy. So, I mean, as we're kind of approaching the end of this, like, where do people go if they want to submit samples, learn more, follow you along with your journey, all of that fun stuff?
Well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find in general. I have my own website, which is just annaschwabe.com. Easy to find on LinkedIn. So our website is currently it's under construction. If somebody wants to ask that website, just message me on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll send you over so you can read all about it. Um,
Perfect.
yeah. And yeah, I'm doing that. Oh, and this is brand new information. I'm moving to Houston, the Houston area.
Whoa, that's a big move.
Yeah, so
Cool.
I'm gonna go move out there and I'm going to work with Zennetix, which is a tissue culture company. Uh, so that's super exciting. I'm also working with MyFlora DNA on lots of pathogen testing and being able to test based on symptoms rather than just guessing. If you've got
Cool.
plants that are turning yellow, what's going on? It could be multiple different pathogens or it could be a nutrient issue. So
Right.
we're building out not only do we have symptom pathogen kits, we're also creating kits for that will do pathogens and nutrients at the same time.
Wow, that's cool.
It's like super affordable compared to anything else that you can get, so that you get multiple tests, one answer, like, oh, it's not lettuce chlorosis virus, it's you got you got a nutrient issue and it's potassium or
Cool.
whatever, nitrogen or
Oh, that's so needed. Yeah. Especially having like, being able to test multiple things instead of having to send out things to different people for different things and then like compare the results.
and that
Just
all
make it
takes so much
simple.
time. Like, oh,
Yeah.
test this. Oh, it's not that. Test this. Oh, it's not that. Like you're losing valuable time, right? So I feel like a lot of the stuff that I do is just to help people. I'm a big helper. I'm a big yes girl. Like I like to help people. So that's kind of,
Well, we
what I
appreciate it. Yeah, that's so cool. And good luck with your move to Houston. I've heard great things about it. I've never been myself, but it looks like a wonderful place to live.
Yeah, it's actually north of Houston, so the Lake Conroe area is where we're kind of going, and I think it looks really cool. It's a blue area, so we'll fit in well
Nice.
there.
That's awesome.
And what about you? Like you've been doing a whole bunch of stuff too. We barely talked about your work that you're doing right now, and then I know people can find you pretty easily too.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find too. Honestly, LinkedIn, I'm easy to find, but hard to get to respond on LinkedIn, but you can still try. So I'm Riley Kirk on LinkedIn. I'm Cannabichem on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of the other things. And then our nonprofit is Applied Pharmacognosy. So you can check that out and fill out our contact form, learn more about our research projects, find our white papers, find our blogs. But yeah, we're pretty easy to stay in touch with because we post a bunch of stuff all over the internet
And
all the time.
do you have any current like research? Because I know you've done a lot of like crowdsourcing, stoner science, like actually asking the people who are consuming about their experiences instead of like putting people in a clinical trial setting.
Yeah, so we're creating like predictable algorithms to be able to take all of that user generated data and try to provide like using a certificate of analysis how to provide more predictable outcomes for different brain types. So that's kind of like one big project that we're working on. But we're also working with some cannabis companies in this new Schedule 3 infrastructure. So I can't tell you too much about that because there's all kinds of legal stuff, but
Mhm.
that's kind of we're definitely interested in that. We're still doing like smoke studies, understanding different parameters that go into like a high quality smokable product, whether it's the growing or the dry and cure. I just finished up teaching a course at Vermont State University, so that's been super fun. And I'm super glad I had the opportunity to do that. I'll be offering my class again next spring, so I'm
What
only going to
class is
teach
that?
it. So it's called Cannabis as Medicine, and it's really about like pharmacology and chemistry about cannabis, all the medicinal effects, some adverse effects. Yeah, all the fun stuff.
I think I saw your TikTok where you're like, first day of school.
Yeah.
Fun, fun.
Yeah. But thanks for having me on your show. And this was like a
Yeah,
fun dual podcast. This is super
yeah, for
cool.
sure. All right. Riley, it was so good to have you on the show. And oh my God, this was like one of the most amazing conversations I think I've had in a while.
This was super fun. Yeah, I love the idea of the dual podcast. So, yeah, and listen to the other episodes of Anna's podcast, My Flora DNA. I don't know when you release them, but I've seen a lot of really cool clips. So make sure to check out her other episodes if you haven't listened to it already. And yeah, mad love, everyone. We'll catch you in a couple of weeks and continue the nerdy conversations.
Yay. All right. Have a good day.
Peace, love, 420.
All right. Bye.